And welcome back. As we continue on our journey with file, let's go ahead and take a look at a special class that exists within Java, which is that of the file class. So what is the file class? Well, when we take a look at this class, you'll notice that it's not really an IOStream class, but we often use a conjunction with file IO. The class file is actually very important to file IO programming, that it's actually included in the Java IO package. Now, the file class contains methods that allow you to check various properties of the file, such as whether there is a file with specified name, where the file can be written to, and so forth. The class file works the same way with binary files also as it does with text files, so we don't have to try and approach it in a different manner. Now, the file class, of course, has to deal with abstract name. And what does that mean? Well, that means that it's going to take a name, known as the abstract name, as a constructor, and it's going to pass that in as a string argument. So the file class really checks the properties, if you want to think about it, of names. So there's a method for that, which is the method exists, and that's going to test whether or not there's a file with an abstract name. Moreover, the abstract name may be a potential directory or folder, if you want to think about it that way. And then you could test to see whether it's a folder or file using the method isDirectory, which will test whether that abstract name is the name of a directory or not. Now, the abstract name may either be a relative path name, which includes the case of a simple file name, or it could be the full path name. Now, the file class can be used, you can think of it as a wrapper class. So, what does this mean? Well, that means it's a wrapper class for file names. The constructor for the class file takes a string as an argument and produces an object that can be thought of as a file with a name. So if we look here, we have file object equals new file data.txt, and as long as the file object can be read, or not, it says if it cannot be read, that is going to say that it's not readable. You can use the file object and methods of the class file to answer questions such as, does the file exist? Does your program have permission to read that file? Does your program have permission to write to the file? Now, we look at those methods of the file class. There are quite a few. We're going to give them to you, and we're not going to necessarily demonstrate all of them, but I want you to be aware of them just because, obviously you can go out to Java documentation and look at all these, but I want to kind of briefly touch on them. So, of course, we have a canRead method, which just tests whether the program can read from a file. And this is simply going to be a Boolean, so which means it's going to return true if the file named by the abstract path name exists and is readable by the program. We have the Boolean set read only, which pretty much is looking to see if the abstract path name is set to read only. Is that file editable? Returns true if it is read only. Otherwise, it's false. False will, of course, mean that we're probably not read only, which means we could probably edit that file. Can write is very similar, all right? So can write is, obviously, we want to be able to write to that file. So again, another Boolean condition here. And of course, the option to delete, which is going to try to delete the file or the directory named by that path name. The directory, of course, has to be empty in order to be removed. And it returns true if it's able to delete that file or directory, and returns false if it's unable to delete the file or directory. Additionally, we have the create new file, and you notice it has a throws IO exception here, all right? Because, whenever we start dealing with creating or, accessing files, obviously there's this potential for an IO exception. And you notice that what it does, it creates a new empty file named by that path name, provided that a file of that name does not exist. Then we start moving into some of our other methods that aren't Boolean. So for example, we have a string called getName, which simply is just going to return the last name in the abstract path name, which is another way of saying it's the file name. We have, of course, getPath, which of course just gets our abstract path as a string value. We have the Boolean rename to, which allows us to rename it to a new file name. Then additionally, we have the isFile. And what this one, of course, is returns true if the file exists that's named by that abstract path, and the file is, of course, a normal file. Otherwise, we're going to get false. We have the isDirectory, which returns true if a directory or folder exists that's named by that path name. We have the Boolean makeDirectory, which makes the directory named by the abstract path name. Now, note this will not make parent directories. So, as again, only can make things that are within inside of a folder already. Now, we also, of course, have the ability for make directories, which you'll notice this one has an S on it. which makes the directory named by the asterisk path name, and will create any necessary but non-existent parent directories. So if we want to have those parent paths too need to be made, then this is the method we're going to want to use here. We have public long length, which of course returns a file length in bytes of the file name named by that path name. So it's like we want to know how long is that path name, because remember, sometimes we need to know how long a path name is, because certain operating systems are only going to have a certain number of characters that you can have in a path name, and if it exceeds that, we're going to have potential issues. All right, and so if we look at Eclipse, I have, of course, a quick demo of the file class here. So we're going to go ahead and have a scanner here. We say we have a line and a file name, and so we're going to say, hey, I'm going to store a line of text into line of text, so we just store that into line. And then what we're going to do is we're going to enter a file name, so we're going to get that file name here. And then we're going to use the file class to go ahead and generate that file. And it's going to say, while it exists, it's going to say there's already a file name, enter a different file name. And if there is, we're going to get a prompt to change it. And then, of course, we're actually going to attempt to write to that file. So here's our print writer. And we still have our output stream with new print writer file, output stream file name. Remember, file name, of course, is defined by this string here. And, of course, there's a catch statement here, so if we can't open it. And then we are going to go ahead and write to that file. It says writing line. Of course, line is that input that we gave to the file. And, of course, we're just going to output the file name. There's our output stream. We're going to close it, and writing completed. So let's go ahead and give this a whirl. And so enter a line of text, okay? Let's just say this is something interesting. Now enter a file name to hold it. Let's just go ahead and make, for our purposes, a text file. All right, it says writing, this is something interesting, to the file something.txt, writing completed. And if I go back to my project file and hit refresh, you'll see now I have a something.txt, which if I open up, it says this is something interesting. Now, if I go ahead and try to rerun this program, so let's go ahead and do the same thing. And I believe we had gave the input, this is something interesting. All right, and we do our file name, we're going to do something.txt. And notice now we have a conflict. There's already a file name, something.txt, so we get the prompt to enter a different file name. So let's just do another .txt. All right, and so now if I refresh this, you'll see now I have another .txt and I have something.txt. So again, another cool way that we can go ahead and start doing some of our file management. But of course, up to this point, we've only worked with text files. What about binary files? What is their purpose? What do they do? That's going to be the next thing we're going to need to look at, and how we can start processing that and why we might want to use a binary file versus a text file.